The following clip is presented to you by The Extreme Life of Matt Hardy, available every Friday wherever you get your podcasts and at extremehardy.com. In the beginning of 2003, he's on the fast track to becoming a main eventer. We watched in our archive, extremehardy.com, the Royal Rumble 2003 episode. We watched the Royal Rumble match, and Booker comes out and gets a big-time reception. People are ready for this guy. Mm-hmm. The problem is, it's in the middle of Triple H's reign of terror. Booker becomes the number one contender.
Did they brand it as his reign of terror?
No, that's what the fans branded it, and it became a running bit. Okay. They should have leaned into it, truthfully. But he wins this Battle Royal to become number one contender at WrestleMania. And this feud between Triple H and Booker T is maybe one of the most controversial feuds in WWE history. Triple H references Booker's nappy hair and says that he was there to dance and entertain people like Triple H, saying that people like you, meaning Booker, aren't supposed to be champion. There are clearly some racial undertones here. It doesn't take a genius to figure that out. And it comes under a lot of fire, and Triple H just pins Booker clean at WrestleMania. Booker really struggled to get back to that level again in WWE after that. What was the sentiment about this program in the locker room? And did you ever have any conversations about it with Booker, or did anyone in general?
I haven't. I would have liked to know what Booker thought about it in detail. I mean, obviously, Booker was he was at a point in his career where he could stand up for himself. So I'm not saying he was okay, but I mean, he had to be okay enough to like still do it and go through it, because I know he was very adamant about being involved in everything he was doing at that point. And I feel like this is probably a Vince call, and he thought it would be something that would probably get sympathy on Booker as a babyface. That's probably what he was going for. And I don't know if that was exactly the right way to do it, because it is one of those things as society's changing and as times are changing too. It's kind of, it's a pretty controversial topic. I mean, and once again, it's like when Vince had that created for me, he wanted me to speak like a black rapper, and just talk about how Mattitude was oppressed, like black culture, which is I get what he's trying to go for. But it's like, once you get with society and morals and like where we're at in U.S. history and culture, it's not really probably the best call. And I feel like that's probably where Vince was there. Maybe that's at a point where he's starting to get a little outdated. If I'm not mistaken, a little later than that is when Vince drops the N-word on TV too, right? That's like a year or so later, which is wild, just so crazy.
And Booker.
Well, yeah, Booker, he does it to Cena, and then Booker hits him with, "Tell me he didn't just say that," if I'm not mistaken. Very, very, very strange, man. And I feel like that probably really sums up Vince McMahon in so many ways. He's just like out to be the ultimate entertainer, and he wants to like, really try and touch hot buttons to like evoke people's emotions. But I feel like sometimes he's kind of like crossing over lines, especially as society and times are changing. That's kind of how I feel about it.
Times have changed a lot since then, but even then, this was looked at as a pretty controversial thing. And
that's what I'm saying. At that time, times had changed. You know what I mean? We were in a different era, and like, it's one of those things too. Like, like race and ethnicity and background. I mean, it was we had to like make people equal, and we couldn't like shit on one another. That's kind of how society was changing at that time. But Vince, once again, was still like, well, we can go to this or we can go to that. This guy's a Mexican, put him on a lawnmower. I mean, you see a lot of that stuff with Vince, like he did with the Mexicals. And I don't think Vince did that like intentionally to try and be racist. He was just like, well, that's what, these people are kind of known for, their culture. So maybe we should like roll with it. And, their people will get behind it, or they'll feel sympathy for him. And I think some of that stuff was pretty misplaced and displaced.
Mm-hmm. It's worth discussing because here's Booker getting over organically, not having to lean into any stereotypes. He gets over because he's a really good wrestler. He's entertaining as hell, and people like cheering for him. They're into it. he gets to this point where he's feuding with the boss's son-in-law.
Right.
And like you said Booker would stand up for himself, but he's also got to play the political game there where he's feuding with the top guy here, who's the boss's son-in-law. And if you say something, that might get you some, weird eyes thrown your way. And on top of that, let's call a spade a spade. Vince McMahon's track record of booking African-American and Black performers at that time was not very strong at all. So the fact that Booker got over organically and in a very real way and then was taken down a notch significantly, I don't know, man. It's, in my opinion, it speaks very poorly to Vince's mentality at the time.
Right.
Just my opinion.
A question that I would really love to know. Now, Triple H was very powerful at this time, right? This is when he's really coming into power. And I really wonder, was this Vince really forcing Triple H's hand, or was Triple H like it?
Yeah.
I have no idea. I would love to know the answer to that, but I don't, obviously.
Yeah. And it sucks because it really knocks Booker down a bit on the card. And he is back in the mid card for several years after that. And he doesn't reach the main event again until he has to completely change his character, which we'll get into in a couple minutes here. But just, it sucks that like organic Booker wasn't good enough to be world champion.
I mean, organic anybody in pro wrestling is the best possible case scenario. Always. If someone gets over organically, that is amazing. Sami Zayn got over organically through his work with the Bloodline. I mean, Daniel Bryan got over organically when fans were understanding more and like they just understood how much he busted his ass night in and night out. I mean, anytime someone gets over organically, that is always the best case scenario because also fans have a lot of pride in that act as well. And they want to get behind them. They want to support them. That's so important. And I hate diminishing someone when something is organic and then you try and shape it into something else, especially Vince's own vision, which he was, always very guilty of many times in the past. Like someone gets over organically and then he has a Vince McMahonism that he wants to like kind of push this character into and like, this is going to take him to the next level. Yeah. And a lot of times that ends up being a mistake.
And like it did change over time. I mean, he obviously pulled the trigger on Kofi. He pulled the trigger on Bobby Lashley, which was a huge one given all of Lashley's history of start, stop. Bobby Lashley just got so undeniably, look at this guy. He looks like Thor. It's crazy. You had to pull the trigger on him. It just stinks in hindsight because, not to say that Booker T had a bad career, he had a Hall of Fame level career, but he could have been even bigger if they just wrote it and just let him be a top guy consistently by being Booker T.
Yeah. No, I agree with that.